Welcome to the EWTN Great Britain podcast with me, your host, Peter Jones. You're listening to the first episode in our series on Catholic Man UK. I'm joined today with the man behind it all, Sam Baker. Sam, how are you?
It's good to actually be out in Sharpenow Clappers in the middle of Bedfordshire, which is where I grew up, and I remember coming here a lot actually with my family, particularly with my father, escaping the house on a Sunday after lunch. And my father was a fantastic storyteller, and he could dream up stories just as we were walking along, pretty much along this path we're going along now. You know, boys' own stories, and I remember one particular one that must have gone on for months, maybe years, called Fort of Danger, about a young man who finds a steel box in his back garden, going back to the Second World War, and in it was some papers that essentially gave him ownership of some fort in Eastern Europe, and it was his adventures going off across Eastern Europe and coming up against all the baddies and everything. And so Sharpenow Clappers holds some great father-son memories for me, so it's good to be back. I haven't been back for, well, many years, say maybe 20 years or so. And one of the other things was that Sharpenow itself is up on a great hill, and we used it as a fort too, so with my siblings, we would just charge around in. We're approaching this now. We can see it ahead of us. This path stretching out towards the trees there.
It is a good, fertile land for the imagination, Sam. No question about that.
Yeah, absolutely, yes. This is where I grew up, really. Yeah, one of the things, if we're talking about masculinity, one of the things I think that we've lost as men in this day and age is a sense of attachment to the earth, attachment to the soil. I think we've been separated from it by technology, haven't we? Yeah, it's this sort of thing that kind of moulds you as a young man, isn't it? Getting out and, getting absolutely thoroughly dirty and scratched and, out of breath and scrambling up and down hills. Fantastic. And, when you consider that, we're in Lent, obviously, and we had on Ash Wednesday that, man, thou art dust, and to dust thou shalt return. We're made from the soil, and that separation from the soil is essentially separating ourselves from the essence of who we are. And a return to the outdoors and to growing vegetables and keeping chickens and all those sorts of things, is
no bad thing.
No bad thing. People might have written off as a little bit, twee in the good life, but actually it is a return to who we are. Returning to the soil. And that's where we find a level of satisfaction and life. So no, it's good to be out here. Very good to be out here. We don't want to idealise it too much. But men are meant to be in their home. I mean, it's
you go ahead.
It's perhaps a fallacy that we've come to believe over the years, that men are meant to be out there somewhere. And of course, men always have been out there providing for their families. But again, if we return back to technology, it is the technology that divorces us. We can take a car and within minutes be miles away, take a plane, be even further away. And we think that this is the life of luxury. This is what meant to be doing. That fast car and that business class flight to
wherever,
the office in the States. And,
right.
And that seems to mark us out as men.
On that note, we're both fathers.
Yeah.
And the main vocation, if we can say that, is marriage. And with that usually comes children. So what, in your opinion, Sam, does the Catholic man look like?
Well, I mean, you mentioned marriage, and, he will either be married or on his way to being married, and that's either to his wife or to his parish. He's either going to be, generally speaking, a married man, husband and father, or he's going to be a parish priest. God put man and woman together right at the beginning in that garden, talking about the soil. And they were meant to both be there to tend it, to look after it.
We're told we're the primary educators, not a phrase you hear so much, although in Catholic circles it's making something of a quiet comeback. That cuts the grain, really, of dropping your kids off at school and somebody else taking care of it.
That's right, exactly. And, again, one of the things about the epidemic that we're in and people talking about the return to homeschooling, I think people are going to find out pretty quickly how to educate their children. So, no, one of the things that I haven't explored too much, but, I do understand that in the Jewish tradition, it was certainly the father that was the prime educator in the faith specifically. It was the fathers that passed the faith on to the children. And so you could say in a practical matter, particularly as the children, or when the children are younger, the mother tends to have greater influence on their early years education, and that's right, that's how it should be.
I find that just naturally happens. I not step back, but in those early years, it seems to me obvious that the mother does most of that, does the heavy lifting, let's say that phrase. It's not like I abandon my role.
Unquestionably, because the mother is there first and foremost as the nurturer of the children, and she does have that particularly special task of, in their early years, guiding them and forming them into the sort of young people that they are going to become. And there's that natural bond, obviously, the natural physical bond that they both share with the child, arriving into the world from the mother's womb. And then the father steps in as an outsider, almost. And I think there's a couple of roles there. First of all, there is a need, particularly with boys, to separate those boys from, let's say, a maternal tie that, if they were kept to, would work against them becoming young men. Yes, absolutely, yes. And that sense of the father coming in as the other also kind of gives them some understanding of who God the Father is, as someone who is outside of us, someone who we need to turn to, someone who we need to discover, someone who we need to build up a relationship with. And if we return back to your point about men as educators and educators in the faith, our primary task is to educate our children, not just through activities and things, but primarily by who we are. Educate them in knowledge of who God the Father is, in self-sacrificing, in care, in mercy, in guidance, in becoming adults, in becoming grown-ups, not just physically, but also in the faith. So I think that's one of our key roles, certainly. I think for men, it does need a little bit of courage to step between the child and the mother, because, mums are very protective of their children, aren't they?
There's many podcasts to be done, I kind of think, on this. An underlooked at subject, because when it comes to disciplining kids, I think it's a man's game.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's not even a question of power and all those kind of things which the modern culture might lay at your feet and say, oh, you're some kind of rotten misogynist.
Yeah.
I think it's a huge weight off the mother.
Well, being out here in the countryside in an environment where, as far as I remember from my sort of father telling me when we came out to Sharpenot Clappers, it was a fort, or there was a fort here, or could well have been a fort. And in those days...
Let's agree, there was a fort. I want there to have been a fort.
Yeah. But, in those days, we're thinking back, goodness knows how long ago, but the job of the men was to provide a safe environment, and that was essentially to protect the boundaries. Well, I suppose, first of all, to create the boundaries and then to protect them. And then within those boundaries, the women together, and along with the men, created an environment of safety, security, of nurturing, and that's what we still need to be doing today. Here are the boundaries. I'm a teacher. I quite clearly understand that the simple things that make your class work is to get kids to line up outside the door in a straight line, walk in sensibly, stand behind their chairs, those little things set the boundaries, and then you have a good learning environment. And it's the same for dads in their own homes. Well, even, I suppose, more important for dads in their own homes today.
Yeah, this is where society really begins, from the home, the kids that come out of it. There's so-and-so's child. Yeah. It's a good child, comes from a good family.
Yeah.
All of that is a life worthy of aspiration. To have that reputation and work for it. And that's your gift to society. My children and the institution of my small family, which...
They then become themselves the providers and protectors of society. And you can see how that has all slackened off over the last generation or two, as people have no sense of their duty to society because it hasn't been instilled in them.
Well, sure, anything goes. We can... hours of chat's been had on that. Anything goes almost, doesn't it? You decide your own rules.
Yeah.
But what for us, Sam, as the Catholic, The rules have been decided,
Yep.
you might say.
Yeah.
You know, the dogmas are there.
Yeah.
We ascend to its teachings. I kind of
Yeah.
only come across that phrase recently.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And I like it because it removes the... I see sometimes online debate, you know, do we accept everything? You know, should we have a think about it?
Yeah.
We're not here pick and choose.
Although going back to the point about, you know, children perhaps not having been educated as well as they could have been, that I include myself in that as a young man, as a child and a young man, that I've had to do a lot of exploration about the Catholic faith myself.
It goes
as
for many
I've
of us,
grown up.
doesn't it? Yeah. We're all products of that environment.
Yeah. But if you start from the point that, okay, I believe that what the church teaches is absolutely true and valid, then anything that I have had difficulties with, I need to find out more information about it and say, well, why is this what the church teaches? And then where is my responsibility as a man in living that out?
There's a pain barrier to go through there as well.
There is.
You know, I can think when I see on the Facebook group, you know, guys come back, sometimes you just look at his profile, I think, oh, guy just looks like normal guy that you see.
Yeah.
Whatever that is. But
you're talking about the CMUK Facebook members group. Yeah. Yes.
And you look at him, well, whatever a normal guy is, but I kind of know it in my heart when I see it.
Yeah.
I think, well, this is encouraging. You know,
it is.
Because there is a huge leap to make from the message that's been normalised out there to come, no sex before marriage.
Yeah.
For one.
Yeah.
No porn, none of that. You know, all that kind of fasting, a life of prayer, going to mass every Sunday.
Or that simply as a man, you are meant to take some responsibility for yourself, then for your wife, then for your children, and then as a family unit. And that actually you've got to let go of some of the things you thought were important to you. Who knows? It could be your computer games, it could be your fast cars, it could be your regular holidays or whatever. And that's got to shut down to some extent. Not to sound negative, because the flip side actually is a great voyage of discovery. And other things come in to take the place of what you might have lost.
Us as Catholic fathers, Catholic men, I don't want to label fathers for sure, because there's all kinds, but it's for us to get that message out there and say, well, you know, here it is. Here's kind of the hand down for us that are trying to work out this life.
But there is a great appetite for it. I don't think our job will be made too difficult in trying to sort of hand over this knowledge and understanding, because as you've seen from the growth of members on the Facebook group, men are beginning to flock to the group, and certainly these last few weeks I've seen quite a upturn in members, member requests.
I'm always not amazed, but very encouraged. There's a wealth of knowledge in the group.
Yep, definitely.
You know, people put prayer requests out, questions out, and
an
impressive honesty. I've always kind of think that men just generally are honest. Years of amateur sport. Told me that.
Exactly,
as long as the changing room door is closed.
Actually, I like your analogy of sport, because, you know, and we do love rules, we do love playing sports by rules, but there is some lack of clarity in those rules, and I think we do have to tighten up on the rules. And as any sportsman will know, you've also got to get yourself under the barbell, and do a bit of heavy lifting at the same time. So we may well sit around and chat, but actually it needs focused chat, and that's, if we're going to carry on this analogy, that's where the coaches come in, our priests, our deacons, our academics, those people that really do have a handle on their stuff and perhaps have missed a team to give it to. So I think it's a great opportunity at the moment. If we're successful with Catholic Man UK and encouraging men to live out their lives as authentic male Catholics, they should be doing that offline with other guys in their parish, in their locality, and generating some momentum and some life in their local church and their local families. That's how it should essentially play out. But, I mean, I think Facebook's here to stay, at least for the foreseeable future, and people are getting an awful lot out of it in terms of the Catholic men's group.
No bad thing.
No, not at all. And I think we also need to remember that there are a number of young men out there who haven't yet perhaps decided whether their vocation is spiritual fatherhood, becoming a priest, or religious, or biological fatherhood. And there is a lot of work to do. I think I missed out on that. You know, I talked about as we first came up here, being with my father, but he himself wasn't the best educated in the faith. He had his own struggles. He did leave me to my own devices, and it's not until now in my 40s that I feel I have some kind of understanding of the faith that I can suitably apply to my own life. And I wish I'd spent more time with other men when I was younger who were men of faith, who I could have as an example. And I think that's missing with young men. It's also perhaps missing with us older men as well, to a large extent. And so the Facebook group's been very good, I think, for highlighting to many of us.
Like a stepdad, if you like. Some kind of digital stepdad.
Yes, that's right. That there are other men out there who feel the same as us, want to live out their faith in the same way, and who could be good models, good mentors. Still, I think, having said all that, our real vocation is in our families, and that's either our parish families as a priest or our biological families as fathers. And in this day and age when families can be so messed up, I think every man needs to step up and be a father in some respect, helping to mentor other young men perhaps, or helping out families where they know that dad's missing for whatever reason. And I think there's a slight fear of possibly stepping in or overstepping the mark. But no, I think we do need to be men of action, and that is to sort of uphold the family in whatever form that is. And then being present to one another. I think the fraternity then comes next, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. First duty, of course.
Yeah.
And it's obvious, it's at home.
Yeah.
The parish we go to made a real believer of me. It's the old Mass, which I still don't know many words of, but
Yeah.
I don't really mind that too much.
Yeah, well, we don't talk much anyway, do we?
Don't talk much.
Sit and listen.
One of the things I first noticed when I started going is how many single males are there.
Yeah.
Near enough all my life, where have they been?
Yeah.
Families there, kids there, teenagers there.
Yeah.
It's almost
Yeah.
kind of a mini paradise.
Yeah.
It just in terms of there is another Catholic who the resurrection isn't an inconvenience.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one way of putting it.
And you can just talk about whatever it is.
Yeah. It has shaped my faith in the last year or so that I've been going. And perhaps this is slightly one for another podcast as well.
I think while we're just getting the general arc, I feel like it deserves a mention.
Yeah. I hadn't been going to the Latin Mass at all beforehand, and I was fairly ambivalent about it. Didn't seem to matter to me one way or the other what form people went to.
I might echo that. I would have poured some scorn on Latin Mass guys just for being so po-faced, generally speaking. But I'd be similar to you.
I wasn't even in that that kind of arc of thinking because I don't know. I just didn't give it that much thought at all. And I didn't even know the vocabulary, old rite, new rite, that kind of stuff.
All right, yeah.
I suppose, however, what was clear to me at my old parish was that I was one of the few males, one of the few fathers. And I suppose that's what started me off along the road of Catholic Man UK, trying to link up with other Catholic men. Eventually, when I did go to Latin Mass at our parish for the first time, it was simply to appease a few other guys who said, "Mill, you must come along, you must come along." Oh, well, this Sunday I actually can come along, and I'll tell you I've come along, and then I'll go back again. But like you, I was really drawn by looking at the sort of range of people who were there, the numbers of fathers and their families, the numbers of young men who were there, all looking very normal. If you can say, what's a normal Catholic?
Yeah. We're going to say it though anyway, because it's worthy of mention.
Yeah.
This guy, this normal guy, whoever he is.
Yeah, absolutely.
Better men than me can define it.
I had no idea of the sort of levels of polarisation that could go on between those that followed the Latin Rite or the Old Rite and so on. All totally new to me, but I fell in love with it, and again, that's another podcast, and I've stayed with it. What intrigues me, however, is that as I've got to know you guys there, every other man there who is around my age, who's also a father, is also doing something specific for the Catholic Church.
That is true, isn't it?
Yeah.
Again, we've not been huddled together by some master plan other than maybe our Lord.
Yeah. I mean, as you here with your work, we wouldn't be out here recording if it wasn't for what you were doing. And I don't want to list off every guy there, you know as well as I do, but those involved in pro-life, those involved in Regina Caeli, the hybrid Catholic schooling system.
You can't ignore it, really.
You can't ignore it, no.
Can't say something.
The walled garden. I had all this list in my head just a second ago.
Forget tedious lists.
Yeah, and you know as well as I do who they are and what they do. But it struck me that the men were not just fulfilling their duty to their families, but they were fulfilling an extra duty to the wider community, the wider Catholic community, and that's what, to a large extent, helps hold us together.
I'm sure there's many out there that go to Mass, more just to stay in the game, determined to get there.
Yeah.
Mass is not a huge sense of community or encouragement or...
No.
I'm not here to give anyone a hard time. I've sensed that about you as well. I couldn't care less for the polarising side of these things.
Not at all.
It's very hard to ignore those benefits and there is obvious differences.
As it says in the Bible, we're the few, the ones who are actually going to harvest. And if anything that I'd want to put out on this podcast to other Catholic men is step up and join us.
Well, you mentioned action, about taking action. So let's finish on this. It's a courageous act to take action and be a Catholic man. It's easy to slip into cowardice.
We hoped we might avoid the topic of the epidemic, but in times like this, that's when people did step up, and particularly the Catholics stepped up, because we do have that sense that there is a greater calling, or someone who is greater than us doing the calling, and where others might turn and run in fear, we have some level of courage that makes us step out. So, great opportunity. A phrase as I was driving over to meet you was, now is the favourable time. Now is the time of our salvation. Paul to the Corinthians. And now really is the favourable time. Anything could happen now. Anything.
Sure.
And it literally needs us to step out. And things will happen. Unquestionably, they'll happen. So I think there's great hope in times like this. Here we are, up on top of a great big hill in the middle of Bedfordshire. We can almost, except for the fact the trees are in the way behind us, we can almost do 360 around here. And if I really had some courage,
Climb a tree.
I'd climb a tree and shout out from the tops of the tree and go, come on, guys, now is the time, now is the favourable time.
What would you say for any guys that on the edge of the faith, or something like that? What's the first step?
A lot of guys are finding us online, and that is a good use of today's technology. I actually would say, find some fraternity. Sure, get down on your knees, definitely. Sure, go and find a priest, but also find where the other guys are. Find us, we're here. Look out for other Catholic guys. That's where your faith is going to be really bolstered, knowing that other guys are doing it. I think I was listening to some other guys talking, some Christian guys or Catholic guys, I can't remember, podcast or something. And they were saying, Dad took us fishing when we were kids. How did we learn to fish? And I think his brother said, we didn't. Dad just sat there and gave us a rod. He taught us nothing. And the other guy said, no, that was just it. We just sat and watched him and we learnt. And now we can fish. And it's the same. Any new guy coming to the faith, sit with us. Watch what we do. Join us. Come to church. Come and pray the rosary with us. Do morning prayer, whatever it might be, adoration. And that is enough to rub off on you, and that's how you'll come to your faith. That's one way, at least. Many of us who know and love Tolkien he encapsulated it very well in The Hobbit, the character of The Hobbit. We do tend to seclude ourselves, rather, bury our heads a little bit, live in our little parochial environments, and it's not until something really bigger than us draws us out of our little comfort zones that we then step up. Bilbo Baggins finds. Once that taste for adventure is roused again, up we get and off we go. And great things happen.
In our own quiet way, Sam, I've always been admired the Anglo-Saxon method.
Yes. And that often happens, doesn't it, in pubs with a pint or two of beer. That's kind of what we're looking at, really, if we're doing a British Catholic men's group. We are looking at trying to find our own particular way, and I think it's a good thing because it gives us some thought. Who are we? What's our heritage? Where have we come from as British Catholics, and where is it going? We've brought up a number of issues. Firstly, the father as primary educator in the faith of his children. Father is setting certain boundaries around his domestic church. The man as a fraternal being, working with other men, learning from other men. Men also having tasks to the community. I think there's also a number of ways that we could go simply in cracking open some of the key roles that we know were given to Adam. Procreation, primacy, leadership, protection, provision we've talked about. And I always add another two on there, and there's prayer and there's pilgrimage. Pilgrimage in the sense that we're meant to be returning back to our real homes, and our whole life is a pilgrimage. And what does that mean to us as men in particular? But also developing the weapon of prayer. We have access to these weapons, the rosary, for example. So there are, I think, many topics that we can return to.
Sam, if I might throw one into the mix,
Yeah.
one advantage Adam had over the rest of us is his wife was handed to him, dare I say, on a plate. The rest of us
That's a great image.
have to go out and find one, and therein lies a huge subject in its own right.
Absolutely.
Holy
Yes.
Mother Church wants
Yes.
us to get married first.
Yeah, maybe that's where we go next. That's where we started this conversation, so yeah.
Amen. Sam, it's been great chatting with you.
Yeah, likewise. It's been brilliant for coming out for this walk as well.